Hello, I am Aviva reporting live in Jerusalem from room 552 for Israel 24/6 TV. Today is the 2nd of June 2008. Welcome to this edition of Fact Not Commentary, my Monday morning recap of military activity undertaken by the sovereign state of Israel in its war against terrorism. Yesterday, June the 1st, the spokesperson for the Israel Defense Force sent out an official communique. The press has been notified that the terrorist organization Hezbollah has forwarded a coffin to the Israel Defense Force. Hezbollah states that the coffin contains body parts of Israel Defense Force soldiers killed during the Second Lebanon War. The communique is itself a bit unclear as to whether or not the coffin in fact contains the body parts of one soldier or multiple soldiers. In any case, the spokesperson verified that the proper personnel with the IDF and the Israeli police will inspect and examine those remains. Furthermore, the coffin and its contents will then and only then be forwarded to the Forensic Medicine Institute in Abu Kabir for final evaluation. If possible, the identity of the soldiers will be learned. A panel has been duly formed by the head of the Human Resources Branch in the General Staff to directly contact the families of those missing soldiers whose identities are confirmed. In closing, the communique stated that the panel will indeed be in contact with families of missing soldiers from the Second Lebanon War to apprise and update them of developments in that identification process. And from a summary communique last week, the press was notified of the collective actions of the Israel Defense Force, and I quote, "In the past week, IDF ground forces, with the assistance of the Air Force, continued to operate in the Gaza Strip in order to distance terrorist organizations, particularly Hamas, from the security fence, and to operate against Qassam rockets and mortar shells fired on a daily basis into Israel. Thursday, May 22nd, a truck loaded with explosives detonated early morning at Erez Crossing, causing extensive damage to the terminal. Due to many recent alerts, IDF forces were well prepared and managed to prevent an attack of a much larger scale. Shortly afterwards, the IDF targeted and identified hitting a vehicle involved in the attempted terror attack. Later that day, IDF forces operating against terrorist infrastructure in northern Gaza uncovered a grenade launcher and an anti-tank missile in a schoolyard in the outskirts of Sayaya. During the operation, the force fired and identified hitting an armed gunman." End quote. And as reported previously on this show, Friday, May 23rd, while operating against terrorist infrastructure in southern Gaza, IDF forces attacked and identified hitting several armed Arab combatants carrying anti-tank missiles. One IDF soldier was moderately wounded by gunfire during that operation. And on that same Friday morning, an IDF force identified hitting two armed gunmen approaching the security fence in central Gaza. The gunmen did open fire at the force fired back, and as I said, identified hitting them. Small arms, hand grenades, and protective vests were uncovered on the gunmen. As promised by more than one politician in Israel, there has been a continued military response to the ongoing firing of rockets and mortar shells by terrorist organizations based in Gaza. The subsequent response of the Israel Defense Force is outlined in that same communique, and I quote, "During an operation in northern Gaza on Saturday, May 24th, an IDF force targeted and identified hitting an armed gunman who was approaching the forces. On Tuesday, May 27th, more than 10 mortar shells were launched at an IDF force operating in northern Gaza. One soldier was lightly injured and taken to hospital. The force uncovered 2 launchers and arrested 13 suspects for questioning. The IDF targeted 3 mortar shell launching sites in the past week. from which mortar shells are launched on a daily basis at Israel, end quote. And last week alone, hostile Arab combatants based in the Gaza Strip fired 1 Grad-type Katyusha rocket, 17 Qassam rockets, and 79 mortar shells at the Israeli communities of the western Negev. And that concludes this edition of Fact Not Commentary. I am Aviva Lee, reporting live in Jerusalem from room 552 for Israel 24/6 TV. And those of you in Jerusalem today who intend to visit the tomb of Shmuel HaNavi, marking the anniversary of his death, please be informed that Egged has a bus directly to Ramot, especially arriving at that prophet's tomb. That is the Egged bus number 40 Aleph. It leaves Jerusalem along Rehov Shmuel HaNavi every 30 minutes. That service began this morning at 9 a.m. and will continue to and from the prophet's tomb until midnight this coming evening. One-way fare is 7 shekel and 70 agarut. And please check back later today for my report on the humanitarian aid to the population in Gaza. You will hear an interesting accounting development which occurred due to the intervention of this journalist with the director of the civil administration. Thank you, and shalom.